Welcome to World War II Indiana Landmarks, Episode 27. This is the final episode of the series, featuring the Indiana Ordnance Works and Hoosier Ordnance Plant in Charlestown. I'm your host, Ron May, author of the book World War II Indiana Landmarks. For our final episode, we travel south down Interstate 65 to the southeastern city of Charlestown, located on the Ohio River, 13 miles northeast of Louisville. Charlestown, Indiana, was founded in 1808, 8 years before Indiana became a state. The town's early claim to fame was as the birthplace of Jonathan Jennings, the first governor of Indiana. A new claim to fame came during the lead-up to World War II with the need for ordnance. Just before the start of the war, in 1939, the town's population was 750 residents. It was a small, quaint, and quiet town, set in a rural area. But all that ended abruptly in 1940. That was the same year that Congress approved the munitions program that was part of the National Defense Appropriations Act, which opened the way for constructing new ammunition plants in the United States. Charlestown was selected to become the first single-base smokeless powder plant in the country. The decision for Charlestown was based on the town's inland location from the coast, undeveloped land, railroad access, adequate water, and transportation via the Ohio River, as well as its potential labor pool with the city's location near Jeffersonville, Indiana, and Louisville, Kentucky. The production of smokeless powder was needed for the war effort because traditional smoke from gunpowder obscured combatants' vision and revealed their location. The smokeless gunpowder was first crystallized and then produced in cords before being cut into appropriate sizes and inserted into shell casings. Following the July 1940 announcement that Charlestown was selected as the plant site, the federal government began buying large chunks of land, while 13,000 construction workers from all over the country flooded the small town and began building the plants. Street corner markets popped up, schools overflowed with new students, and rental prices for rooms became astronomically high. Rooms in town were rented per shift for sleeping purposes, and garages and chicken huts were converted into makeshift bedrooms. 17 mobile home parks were built that contained more units than Charlestown's 250 homes. Some people put up tents for their quarters, and others chose to sleep in their cars. Chairs in barber shops were rented out for sleeping, and even the local jail became temporary quarters for some workers. By the spring of 1941, Charlestown's population had grown to over 3,000, nearly a 400% increase from the 1939 population of 750. In 1942, one projection estimated that 50,000 people were employed as construction or production workers. When the facilities were completed, many of the construction workers transferred to jobs in the manufacturing facilities. The master plan for the ammunition plant in Charlestown involved building 3 different manufacturing facilities for the ordnance. On May 31, 1942, the Indiana Ordnance Works Plant No. 1, known as IOW1, was the first facility to be completed, which produced smokeless and black powder. The second facility, the Hoosier Ordnance Plant, HOP, was designed for the loading, assembling, and packing of the powder from Indiana Ordnance Works 1, which, after being weighed, was then placed in bags that were sewn shut. The powder bags were used for cannon, artillery, and mortars. HOP had a peak of 8,902 workers. 2/3 of those workers at the plant were women. The bag manufacturing plant in HOP had 1,500 sewing machines used for stitching the bags filled with the powder. The hallmark product was a 16-inch diameter bag of powder. When the bags were loaded 6 deep in the breech of a battleship's turret, the powder could propel a 2,750-pound bullet 25 miles. Construction on Indiana Ordnance Works 2, IOW2, the rocket propellant plant, didn't begin until October 1944. Roughly 10% of the workers in the 3 plants were African American. Although they were initially given only unskilled positions, the demand for workers eventually opened opportunities for them to serve in skilled jobs. Housing and schooling, however, remained segregated and usually meant poorer living conditions. When all 3 facilities were constructed, there were a total of 1,700 buildings at IOW1, HOP, and IOW2 that were built on a landmass of 19,200 acres. The project cost reached $133.4 million. The facilities included 34 administrative buildings, 2 hospitals, 3 research and design buildings, 114 standard magazines, 21 utility buildings, 176 storage units, 149 warehouses, and 566 miscellaneous buildings. The massive property also consisted of 190 miles of roads, 92 miles of railroad track, and over 30 miles of fencing. One man who knew the fence line well was Myron Kelly. Kelly was born in 1915 in Ripley County, Indiana, and graduated from Dillsboro High School in 1933. He landed a job at the ammunition plant property in an unintended and most unlikely way. His job opportunity came via a speeding ticket. In the summer of 1940, Kelly was driving his car hard between Milan and Dillsboro. He was trying to blow out carburetor cleaner from the engine when a state policeman stopped him and issued him a speeding ticket. Kelly shook the officer's hand and commended him for doing his job. A day later, the same officer came to Kelly's workplace and offered him a job supervising the clearing of land for the powder plant in Charleston. Kelly accepted. From June 1 to August 18, 1941, Kelly and his crew used 22,429 sticks of dynamite and 11,165 dynamite caps to clear the land necessary for the ordnance facilities. Because sparks could ignite the dynamite, it was transported to each site by horses fitted with special brass shoes. When the clearing was finished, Kelly was assigned to guard the property's 13-plus miles of fence line. He was on duty when the news came that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. On September 11, 1942, Kelly joined the Army Air Corps. He became a supervisor over a crew of 11 mechanics servicing bombers at Base Air Depot 1, Burtonwood, in Lancashire, England, near the city of Warrington. He returned home in the fall of 1945 and was honorably discharged on December 7, 1945, after 3 years and 2 months of military service. Considering the danger of possible explosions, all 3 plants put a priority on worker safety. Buildings were spread far from one another to diminish the chance of a mass explosion. And copper-lined transfer chutes were utilized that reduced airborne powder movement. Emergency slides were installed in some buildings to provide a quick escape. Conductive shoes were issued for workers to reduce static electricity, and employees were searched daily for matches and other hazardous materials. Those efforts made accidents rare, but they did occur. In the summer of 1944, a fire broke out in a blending tower and killed 3 people. The work shifts were both day and night throughout the war. The 3 plants' operations made a significant contribution to the war effort overseas, producing over 1 billion pounds of the smokeless powder. That amount exceeded the total amount of explosives produced by the United States in World War I. The production of the smokeless powder was more than enough to earn the coveted Army-Navy E Award for Excellence. The plants were reactivated during the Korean and Vietnam conflicts, and once again the town experienced surges in population and activity. While there were several name changes for the plants over the years, by 1963 all 3 plants came under the combined name of the Indiana Army Ammunition Plant. All operations of the plants were halted in 1991, and they were closed for good in 1992. Following the shutdown, the government sold the plants, some to private owners, and much of WW2 became the Charlestown State Park in 1996. Today, part of the land from WW1 is the River Ridge Commerce Center and is used for factories and warehouses in an industrial park. Most of the buildings from the Army Ammunition Plant are gone, but a few remain, although nature is slowly swallowing them and they are being taken down. Some of the original administrative buildings from WW1 remain and are used for office and retail space. In 2007, the Indiana Historical Bureau officially recognized the contribution of the former Indiana Army Ammunition Plant with the placement of a historical marker along Corporate Drive just outside of the Charlestown limits. Behind the marker a short distance is one of the igloo-style ground storage units from the original plant. The igloo and the marker testify to an era long gone, but mighty significant for the town which produced and armed forces which received the smokeless powder necessary for war and ultimately for victory. For more information on Charlestown and the former powder plant, visit the Charlestown Public Library, which has extensive archival material on both the town and the plants. Learn more about the Indiana Ordnance Works and those who served there in my new book, World War II Indiana Landmarks, available for purchase on my website or wherever books are sold. And while on my website, check out my trilogy of Indiana World War II service stories. Thanks for tuning in to this episode.